Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about something that keeps happening every day and there's nothing we can do about it. It's just going to keep happening. And that is we just keep getting older, which is a blessing, right? But there's this thing that like this stigma, this negative thing that is attached to getting older in our culture, probably not just in our culture, but it's just a part of our world. It's probably how it's always been. And this feeling where beauty is seen as something of great value, great worth, even powerful. In our culture, if you are a beautiful or a handsome person, that alone will open up a lot of doors, a lot of opportunities for you career-wise, especially like in our celebrity world, where those are the people that get the leading parts in movies. Those are the people that get the interviews. Those are the people in our culture that get our attention, because I'm gonna use the term beauty to refer to both a man and a woman's appearance, physical appearance. So that is, it's just something that there's no denying it. When we see it, we just can't help but notice it. And I think that the Bible gives us so many details about lots of things. One thing that it doesn't fail to point out as well is someone's beauty, someone's physical appearance. Sometimes there's more information for one person than for other people, and that's what I would like for us to look at. I guess I'll just give you my point from the beginning. My point in this video is going to be that although beauty is something that it is mentioned in the Bible and that it catches our attention, it is not to be confused with a person's value. It is not what makes a person valuable. So who is the perfect example to make this point? Jesus. You would think that if our beauty was what was our identity, what was our value, then Jesus, the Son of God, would have come in the form of a very beautiful person outwardly. But in fact, Isaiah 53:2 describes Jesus as, "For he grew up before him like a young plant, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him." Does this take away from Jesus being the Son of God? Does this take away from his character? Does this take away from his purpose, his calling here on earth? Absolutely not. So we can see how for Jesus, beauty was not even necessary for him to be who he is and do what he was supposed to do, and only he could do. However, we do see in other places where beauty is a part of God's plan for a person. For example, in Esther's story, it actually gives us a very specific description of Esther, one in which I would just kind of, it just goes to show you that the Bible will give you details when it's important. And in Esther's case, look at the way she is described. In Esther chapter 2, verse 7, this is how Esther is described. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. Now, Esther is a very admirable woman in the Bible. She even gets her own book, right, in the Bible. But it shouldn't be because of her beauty. That's not the reason why she is important in the Bible. Her beauty was something that God used to serve his purposes ultimately. We can see this in Esther 2, verse 17. The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So we don't really have any other information for why the king loved Esther more than the rest of the women, except that, the Bible describes Esther's beauty. So we can only assume that it was Esther's beauty that led to this favor in the king's eyes. And it wasn't her beauty and her figure alone. So in our culture, we define what a beautiful woman, what a beautiful man, handsome man, looks like. And people during Esther's time had their own views on what, a beautiful woman should be. In verse 12, we hear a little bit about their culture. It says that it talks about these 12 months that Esther was under the regulations that was for the rest of the women as well. And it says, since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with spices and ointments for women. So it wasn't just her appearance alone, but there was actually this whole process where she underwent in order to be beautified according to their culture's standards. And I guess our own culture also does this beautifying process, perhaps not that lengthy, and perhaps not like with that procedure. So we hear through marketing and just by walking in a mall, we see these makeup stores, and just like that, we are communicated, I should wear that. Or like we see these beautiful women in commercials or in the movies, in our workplace, that have, all of the makeup, the foundation, the primers, the concealers, so it's a lot of layers. And one can literally spend like half an hour just putting on makeup. And so not just through marketing, but if a woman doesn't wear makeup, sometimes you'll get comments like, you don't look so good, you look tired, put a little makeup on. You're gonna go out like that? Why don't you put a little makeup on? So it's kind of like it's reinforced by everybody. So it's almost like our culture believes that not wearing makeup or not doing something to your hair, that's not beautiful. And you need to beautify yourself. And the problem with that is that even though you can continue this process of putting makeup, doing your hair, the only thing you can't do something about is getting older. So you'll have wrinkles and your face is going to change, your body is going to change. And like no amount of makeup is going to stop that. If we buy into that message that the world communicates to us, that our value is in our beauty, our external beauty, as we get older, we're going to feel pretty lousy about ourselves. We're going to feel that we have less worth, less value, we are less beautiful. When the white hairs start to pop up, it's almost like a moment of shame. It feels like, oh no, it's over. You know, my beautiful stage in life is over. And now it's all about, okay, I'm gonna have to dye my hair. I'm going to have to find some creams to rectify the wrinkles. I'm gonna have to go get some procedures done on my lips, on my eyes, get some, what is that stuff called? That stuff to like hide the wrinkles? Botox. And I don't know if you've seen like some of the shows where the women are all about that, and like they get older on the show and it's kind of like, man, that doesn't look right, you know, like sure, maybe I don't see that as many wrinkles as perhaps you would have had, but it still doesn't look right. Maybe you would have looked a little more graceful without all the stuff that you went to go try to do, you know, to yourself. And then, you know, there's like other things that people can do to their bodies to try to create the image that the world says is what is beautiful on a woman. But there's some wisdom in Proverbs that we can learn. In Proverbs 31:30, it says, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Charm and beauty is not like the most important thing according to Proverbs. It actually says that what we should be praising in a woman, and I would say for a man as well, is the fear of the Lord. The character of a person, that is something that we should praise. If there is a beautiful character in a person with wrinkles, with white hair, with hair that is thinning on a man, or just, you know, men go through it as well, you know, this aging process. But if there is character, even though there is like this aged person, that is what we should actually be focusing on. That is what we should actually be praising. Not a handsome or a beautiful woman, but the character of people, no matter if they are, you know, still in their young outer appearance, or if they have aged and that character has become even more beautiful with time, that's what we should be focusing on. And you know who would tell us that? God, the one who created us, the one that, created our youth as well. He demonstrates this. In 1 Samuel 16, we find a story about David. And it's very interesting because, let's see how David is described in the Bible. Okay. In 1 Samuel 16, verse 12, this is how David is described. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. Okay, so David is described as handsome. But when God is telling Samuel, before Samuel knows who is going to be the one that he needs to anoint from among David's brothers, his older brothers, God tells Samuel this. Because it's interesting how the Bible even describes like the thoughts that Samuel was having. So it says in verse 6, when they came and he looked on Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. So that was the moment when the Lord could say, David is more handsome, or David is handsome too. But how does God describe David indirectly? He describes him as a man with this pleasing heart. David's heart is what sets him apart. Not that he's handsome, but his heart. That's what God rejected the other brothers, but he chose David because of his heart. And God teaches us also that men look at the outward appearance. We make judgments of people based off of their appearance. We qualify people based off of their outward appearance. But God chooses people not based off of their outward appearance, but based off of their heart. And if this is how God chooses people, we better be paying more attention to our heart, even more so than our outer appearances, which takes us to 1 Peter 3:3-4. Let's read 1 Peter 3. Let's just read the whole thing in context. It's talking about women, but notice that the emphasis is not on be a beautiful woman. Like, it's not focusing on our physical outer appearance. It's actually focusing on what's inside. Likewise, wives. And these are qualities that are not just for wives, but for women in general. But the application would be for a wife, specifically this, for example. Be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. When they see your respectful and pure conduct, so it's talking about like the way we carry ourselves. Do not let your adorning be external. the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. And then it says, for this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, by submitting to their own husbands. And then it continues to talk about Sarah, how she was exemplary with how she was with her husband Abraham. But this reminds me a lot of Esther, for example. When she was about to go before the king, she had the opportunity to choose how to adorn herself. But she was wise, and she actually asked the person in charge of the woman for his advice. But notice, in the world, in her culture, that was a huge part for being seen as beautiful. The external things, how you adorned yourself. But in God's kingdom, it's not about that. It's not superficial, and it's not about how the world perceives you. It's about how God sees you. That is what's actually valuable and important, and what we should be focusing on. And how beautiful is this, that it says, let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. It brings back the truth that God is looking at the heart. And I'll just throw this in there for the men. In verse 7, it says, likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. And it also talks about the conduct of a man, how he, what is precious in God's eyes is how you are treating your wife as well. In 1 Peter 2, 9 through 10, it says, likewise also that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel, with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness, with good works. Good works. God wants us. God cares about what we do. God wants us, women and men, to live our life focusing on actually working on the inner person, our heart. And the only way that we can actually reach there is through living out what the Bible teaches us, what our character should be all about. And the only way we're going to know is by reading His Word and seeing what is important to God. How can I apply it in my in the stage of life that I am in, whether it be as a single person, a person in a relationship, a wife, a widow, whatever stage of life you're in, look for what God would require of you and what would be pleasing to God in that stage of life. So despite the praises of the world, let's not crave the praises of the world, which would be all about the external, how we dress, how we fix our hair, the makeup that we put, how young we are, how wrinkle-free we look. Those are the kinds of things that the world praises. The body figure, but that's not what we should be focusing on at all. We should be looking for the praise of God, things that God will be pleased with. So if God says this is what's beautiful in a woman, then that's what we should really strive for. If God says, a gentle and quiet spirit, then let's learn what this actually looks like, and let's try to take steps in that direction. So we can have this hope only found in God. I'm sorry, but the world doesn't have this hope. That's why they go and they try and they take all those steps to try to stay as young looking as possible. Because as the world praises that, it also tears them apart when they aren't that anymore. And it's really sad. That's why we should not think in the same way as the world. So something that will never get old is our character. Something that we will never have to hide with makeup are good works. These things will always be there despite what we look like on the outside. So we can have this attitude of bring on the white hairs, bring on the wrinkles, bring on the body changes, because that is not where my value is at. That is not where my worth is at. And as I'm getting older, I am still growing. I am still working on this inner person. And God sees it and He calls that beautiful and He calls that important. And that is what God is looking for in us. So we have this hope. We can embrace aging gracefully, embracing that what a blessing it is for me to enter this next stage in life where, yes, maybe there is going to be some hair loss. Maybe there are going to be some wrinkles. Maybe, but that is a good thing because God has extended my life this long in which I do get to experience this stage of life. So let's embrace it. Let's embrace it and redefine beauty for what God says is beautiful. And that is what is inside of our heart.